Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the 7th in our Webinar Wednesday series. Shalom, bonjour, and hello to all who have registered from around the globe. To be exact, from Israel, England, United States, Canada, and India. Yes, we have someone listening to us from India. I am Mark Mendelson, the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Associates of Ben-Gurion University, and it is once again my pleasure and honor to be moderating today's program. Today, for the first time in our webinar series, I'm not wearing my Ben-Gurion tie, which is a sure sign that summer has arrived in Montreal. I'm thrilled that we have, for the 5th successive webinar, equaled or surpassed our previous webinar Wednesday numbers, and we have over 105 registered. On behalf of the lay leadership of CABGU, C-A-B-G-U, Canadian Associates of Ben-Gurion University, or as we call it, CABGU, K-A-B-G-O-O, I welcome you and thank you all. Please note that we are also live streaming on Facebook. We do have some special guests who have joined us today, and I would like to warmly welcome my good friend and colleague, David Levy, Consul General Concal for Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. Thank you for once again participating. David is always there for CABGU, a huge toda rabba. And another good friend has joined us, someone who I met 9 years ago when I started at CABGU, Ellen Marcus, World Board of Governors Vice President and doting grandmother and protector of animals. Once again, the format of today's webinar is this. I will first introduce Nadav Davidovitch, who will talk for 12 to 15 minutes, and then it will be Yaniv and Amir. I will give each one a 2-minute warning, and then they will speak or they will field questions. As always, there will be a Q&A segment. Executive Director from Montreal, Simon Ben-Simon, will be handling the question and answer period, and Zach Ostrov, Executive Director of Winnipeg, our in-house techie, will be handling our technical issues, of which hopefully we won't have any. Whoever has comments or questions, you will see the Q&A icon, the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen, which you will just have to click to submit your question. Please do not submit them on the chat icon. The topic of today's webinar is the state of tourism and hospitality in post-COVID Israel. As countries around the world reopen their economies and their doors, Israel, whose tourism industry is almost as important as its high-tech one, desperately needs the influx of the millions of tourists who visit Israel each year. My wife and I subscribe to 2 of Israel's most important TV stations, channels 12 and 13, and daily there are reports about how certain areas, which are normally the high-traffic tourist areas, are completely devoid of tourists. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, etc. Eilat is experiencing a bit of internal tourism, but all in all, the tourism situation, and you will hear it from these guys today, is really in crisis. Now, the Department of Hotel and Tourism Management of the Guilford Glazer Faculty of Business and Management, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, is the vanguard of hotel and tourism research and studies in Israel, the only one offering a BA, MA, and PhD degree in this field. The unique curriculum bolsters relevant acumen for the leaders in the industries of hotel, tourism, aviation, beverage, and catering, and more. The studies hone analytical management thinking, providing students with experience that prepares them for management, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the tourism industries, emphasizing social leadership, responsibility, sustainability. The department has an international reputation for quality research and is ranked among the top 50 in the world by the Shanghai ARWU Global Ranking. It is now, we have a little different format today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Nadav Davidovitch. Nadav actually, I think this is his 2nd or 3rd time participating in our webinar series, and I think we're able to give him some miles for it. You know, the way you get on airplanes.
Miles.
That's right. That's right. Speaking miles. Nadav Davidovitch, MD, MPH, PhD, is an epidemiologist. I thought I would get that word, and public health physician. He is a full professor and chair of the Department of Health Systems Management at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Guilford Glazer School. He teaches on health policy, public health, health promotion, and the Israeli healthcare system. He is also affiliated with Columbia University and the School of Public Health, University of Illinois. He was head of epidemiology section of the Army Health Branch and public health officer at the Central District for the Ministry of Health. I personally, with my wife, have seen Nadav being interviewed on the main Israeli news channels and other stations at least a few times a week. He has become quite the star, and he serves us very well, represents us very well. He has co-authored over 120 papers and book chapters, co-edited 5 volumes of books, and published his work in leading medical and health policy journals. Nadav, my friend, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for inviting me. I must say that, first of all, tourism is also part of public health. It's part of a healthy lifestyle, and indeed, Yaniv and I been collaborating for several topics, including a question of food and prison, but that's maybe for another webinar. What I'm going to do today is discuss first the current situation in Israel. Since we had our last webinar, lots of things happened. Just the fact that we are talking about tourism, it means that we are in a different stage. So that's a good sign, but there are lots of challenges. And then I'll discuss, since I'm sitting on several committees, including about the question of culture and opening cultural events, but also about flights. I'll discuss a bit what are the challenges, how Israel is now facing those issues, and I think this will lead to Yaniv and Amir comments and their perspective, of course. So the current situation now in Israel that we opened the economy on several levels. Maybe the most important one was opening schools, but also opening some of the public transportation, just the buses, not trains. That's something that I was a bit critical about it, but it's not our topic today, although it's relevant also for tourism. And there is a big discussion right now in the last 2 weeks. Are we now in the second wave? Yes or no? So I don't think we are in the second wave. I think we're still in the first wave. Definitely on the global scale. We had in the last few days the worst situation globally because we had a large number of people being infected. So we are still in the first wave, but of course, the advancement of the pandemic situation is very different in different parts of the world. And currently the Americas, especially South America, they get the hardest hit, and still in Europe, some countries are like Sweden, for example, or Netherlands, they're still facing the challenges. In Israel, after some time, of course, when we use the so-called the hammer with a lockdown, we reduced the number of cases dramatically, and opening the country for schools and transportation and also restaurants, etc. I think it was a good move because we are very far from herd immunity. We had some serological surveys, and the last one, actually, we saw that on average, about 3% of the country were infected. This is very, very far from herd immunity. So it means that we need to learn to live with the coronavirus. We are far from herd immunity. We are still far from developing a vaccine or treatment. There are lots of promising developments, but it will take some time. So we had in the last 2 or 3 weeks a rise in numbers, but this is also related to the change in testing policies. We are testing now much more asymptomatic cases, and I'm glad we did it. And this is especially when we're looking for clusters. Cluster in schools, cluster in elderly homes, cluster in hospitals. And since we are testing more, we get more cases, but there's also some true rise. But since the main distribution of cases is among the younger population, mainly schools and other places, and since we adopted a very important program to protect the elderly, so most cases are among young people, and this is why in terms of severe cases, people on ventilators, a number of deaths, this is relatively stable. So many times when I'm being interviewed, people ask me, is it second wave or not? I don't think it's a second wave, but I do think that we need to be still on alert. We don't need to be, on the hysteric side. We don't need to think that Corona is over. We need to be alert. We need to be prepared. Sometimes I'm citing the Maimonides, Rambam, that he was really for, going on the middle kind of reaction, including in health. And especially we need to prepare our society, healthcare system, but also non-healthcare parts, such as tourism or cultural sectors, to see how we can live with the corona virus. So it means that we need to prepare, especially before the winter, because then we're going to have many other respiratory cases, such as influenza and other viruses, and then the burden of testing and other measures will be much higher, and we need to prepare in terms of laboratory capacities, epidemiological capacities, but that's another topic, not for today. So this was the first part of my update. The second part, I want to discuss mainly two issues. One is the flights policy, and second is the question of cultural events. So Israel is already discussing the issue of opening flights from other countries for a while. Currently, the policy is that only Israeli citizens can arrive to Israel. They must stay on 14 days quarantine. This quarantine can be done in an apartment. It can be done in Airbnb. So you need to sign a declaration that you have a place where you can stay. Otherwise, people can get a place in hotels, in specific hotels that were prepared for mild corona cases, but these premises were reduced dramatically because we have less active corona cases than we had before. Now it's about 3,000. In general, by the way, we had about 19,000 positive cases since the beginning of the outbreak. About 3,000 of them are active cases right now. So if you have an Israeli citizenship, you can come to Israel, but you need to be 14 days quarantine. And this is, of course, not the best idea to develop tourism in general. Now, you can get an exception. For example, we have international students. We have a medical school for international health with international students. So the Minister of Health and the Foreign Ministry need to get you an approval if you're not an Israeli citizen. But again, you need to be on quarantine. The discussion that Israel conducted in the last few weeks were about what we call green countries, such as Greece, Cyprus, Austria, where currently the situation is that there are only very few new corona cases and things are under control. And originally, now maybe it will be postponed, but originally the idea was to start a pilot on July 1st when tourists coming from green countries, and there was a list of 9 countries, but this is of course very dynamic, can come to Israel and not having the need to be on quarantine. Now, there was a discussion, should they get a PCR test or serological test? This is still an ongoing discussion. I personally thought, and I presented my opinion because I'm sitting on one of the advisory committees for the National Security Center, Malal. I personally thought that if it's a country that is a green country, they don't need to have to do a PCR test. Like you don't need to have a PCR test if you're moving from Tel Aviv to Beersheba, vice versa. Because when it's low number of cases in the country, having a PCR test sometimes can give you false positive or false negative or just false assurance. Of course, the idea was that every tourist will need to fill a declaration, give an address, cellular phones. There were discussions, should they download an application that can trace the position. All these issues are still under discussion. Now, countries that are not green countries, still they need to have 14 days quarantine. And this is only for Israeli citizens. If you're not an Israeli citizen, you need to have a special occasion. I'll give you a very personal example. My sister, she's a former Israeli, but she lives in Italy already for 15 years. She's an opera singer. She met her husband when she studied in Florence Academy of Music. They have two beautiful children. The new one was just born 1 month ago in Italy, in Tuscany. So Tuscany, the rates of corona is relatively low. I mean, it's comparable to Israel, maybe a bit more, but not like in Lombardia or Veneto. So my sister was supposed to visit us unrelated to the corona events on August, and right now I'll be writing a letter to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to ask a special permit for her husband, who is not Israeli, and also their children. It's not clear, but maybe some of the discussion will be that those coming not from green countries, and of course Italy is not a green country, maybe they do a serological test proving that they have antibodies, so they were sick, and then doing a PCR to show that they are now negative, and doing another PCR when they are in Israel, and until the results will be available, they still need to be on quarantine. So this is the current situation. Of course, the question of train operation is also relevant for tourism. And of course, and I'm sure that Yaniv and Amir will discuss, there's also the question of internal tourism in Israel. So hotels were open under all the regulation by the Ministry of Health. We have like a purple, I don't know how to say it, Tav Sagol. It's like a purple sign. If you are fulfilling all the criteria in terms of density, hygiene, etc. So people are now, they started to go to hotels, but this is internal tourism. And again, the question of transportation, internal transportation, of course, here is very important. Now, in terms of culture, so restaurants now are open. They also need to have this purple standard. So temperature is being taken. By the way, I don't think it's a...
Of 2 minutes.
Thanks, Mark. I don't think that taking temperature is really effective. I prefer to have a declaration. By the way, today I was, my temperature was taken and it was 34.4 degrees, so probably maybe I was half dead or something. So many of these measurements are not exactly effective. The opening of several of the cultural clubs can be open according, again, to the purple standard. Again, the question of density, how many people are inside, same thing for gym. And now for larger events such as sport events and also opera and things like that. I was on the parliament, on the Knesset committee this week, and I told them, and maybe I'll finish with that, that culture is part of public health. Tourism is part of public health. And since we're going to live with Corona for many months, we need to see how we can work together. It's not public health against economy. It must be integrated. And we need to find the right way of taking the right measures, but in a very, very kind of balance and appropriate. Proportionality is maybe an important word. And I'm supporting opening these events, doing it in compliance with public health regulations. Thank you.
Nadav? 2 thumbs up, not 1, 2.
Thank you.
Great one. Okay, we're changing our format a bit, and I am now going to introduce both our next participants. First, Professor Yaniv Poria is an associate professor at the Department of Hotel and Tourism Management, Guilford Glaser Faculty of Business and Management at BGU. Professor Poria holds a BA in Tourism and Hospitality Management from Ben-Gurion and a PhD from the School of Management Studies for the service sector from Surrey University in the UK. Poria's research interests are focused on 4 core issues: visitors' experience at heritage tourist sites, special segments often ignored in the tourism literature, namely gays and lesbians and people with disabilities, the conceptualization of tourism, particularly heritage tourism, and sex in tourism. Professor Poria won a number of awards, including the Toronto Award for Young Researchers for Excellence in Academic Research, the King Hussein International Peace Through Tourism Award, and Best Paper presented by iCare. Yaniv is on the editorial board of several journals and teaches heritage tourism management and marketing research courses at the graduate and undergraduate level. Dr. Amir Shani has a PhD from the Rosen College of Hospitality Management at the University of Central Florida, where he earned it in 2009. He has his BA summa cum laude in management and an MBA from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Amir Shani is a lecturer in the Department of Hotel and Tourism Management at our Eilat campus, part of BGU. Dr. Shani specializes in tourism and hospitality ethics, including tourism and the environment, sustainable tourism, ecotourism, and animal use in tourism and entertainment. Dr. Shani's articles have appeared in a variety of leading tourism and hospitality journals. He has also contributed chapters for edited books focusing on destination marketing, zoos and tourism, and quality of life and tourism. Additionally, Dr. Shani has won a number of academic awards, including the annual Dean's Award, the annual Dean's Award. Ladies and gentlemen, our 2 professors.
Mark, can I take it from here? Okay, good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to hear that many people from many different countries have arrived to listen to this. And I hope that I can introduce you to what's going on right now and what, as far as the tourism industry is concerned in Israel, to introduce you to the challenges that Israel is facing right now and give you some data and insight about the back of the house, about the decision-making process with this corona crisis that we are now facing on a daily basis. So I would like to start by asking the question, what is the actual difference between the corona crisis and the other crises that Israel knew before? And unfortunately, there are some dramatical differences between the corona and, for example, all the violent conflicts that we knew before. Generally speaking, about violent conflict, it was relatively short. So it was usually between 1 month and 2 months of conflicts from the beginning until the end. Unfortunately, this is not the situation here. The tourism and hospitality industry were the first one to get hurt from the corona crisis, and they probably will be the last one to get out of it, if at all. And I'm sorry that I'm using this word, if at all. You have to take into account that in Israel, in the tourism and hospitality industry, it's around 220,000 people are working in tourism and hospitality. But it's very important to notice that most of them are in the periphery. They are in Eilat, they are in Tveria, they are in Mitzpe Ramon, they are in areas when there is unfortunately no other option to find a job. And this means that Israel is going to have a devastating effect on the economy, because for those of you who know a lot, right now, formally, the employment rate is between 50 to 60%, but I'm working in Eilat. I'm also the dean of the Eilat campus. I believe that around 80% right now of the population, at least 80% of the population, are right now at home, because unfortunately, there is no job. And I'm sorry to say that I don't believe that in the short term, or at least a year from now, they will have some work. And this is devastating for the Israeli economy. Nadav, in his very interesting presentation, mentioned that the tourism industry in Israel now wants to attract the Israeli people. However, this is a very sophisticated challenge, and I would like to highlight the situation. Right now, the people in Israel most of the people in Israel, do not have the economic power to go to hotels. As you probably know, Israeli hotels are very expensive. I don't want to get into it, but it's basically because of the rent of this of the land and the salaries of the employees, because we are very proud of it that Israeli economy is doing well and everyone is earning a very respectable salary. Unfortunately, now Israelis will not go to the hotels. This is what I suspect, because they don't know when the corona crisis will stop. Another issue which I would like you to take into account. When people went to the hotel in Israel, part of the experience was the restaurants or going to the sea or walking around the streets. This is not anymore a recreational activity because people are afraid. You have to take into account that the tourism industry is people's industry. And nowadays, we are highly afraid of one of each other. Are we? Did the one next to me is ill or not? And this is something that affects people, and we already have preliminary results on this. So unfortunately, I'm not optimistic on this issue as well. I would like to highlight, to discuss a bit, the contribution of the tourism industry. I wish that the tourism industry was contribution to the economy was as high as the high tech. Based on the statistics which I have, the contribution of the tourism hospitality is between 2.6 and 2.7%. By the way, you have to know that in Spain, it's around 12%, in Greece, it's around 20%. So in this respect, it's very good that Israel is not depend on tourism and hospitality like other Mediterranean countries. So this is something to take into account, and I will get to it later. Two areas that are now confronting big challenge is, as I mentioned before, it's Eilat and Tiberias. The Israeli Ministry of Tourism and the are now working, what can they do there? I'm very happy to say that we, as a member of staff in academic department, are involved in this, and we can contribute from our knowledge and give our advice. Just today, I came back from Tel Aviv, and there was a discussion about what should Tel Aviv do tomorrow in order to attract foreign tourists when we were able to do so. And by the way, there are very, very interesting suggestions which Tel Aviv municipality is working on. So this is another point which I wanted to highlight to you. Now, I would like to speak also about not necessarily the physical, what's going on, but how people feel today, those people who work in tourism and hospitality. There are no studies about this yet, but I'm there, and I can tell you that some people are devastating. And it's very important that the Israeli government will open a bit, because if people will not die or will not suffer from the economic struggle that they are facing, they will struggle from the fact that they will feel isolated. So this is something to consider, and I hope that the people who make decision will open as fast as they can hotels, more restaurants, etc. It's a bit strange that today you can go to the sea in Israel and the beaches are packed with people, and I can go and play basketball here in my neighborhood, and the basketball court is completely packed with people, but some of the hotels are closed and you cannot serve certain kinds of food, and everything is, to some degree, you have to stay in one room, and then there are 2 rooms isolation, and then another room, and then 2 rooms isolation. So this is something that people in the hospitality industry feel frustrated about, and I can understand them in this context. Another issue which I would like to speak about is the tourist guides. In Israel, there are between 8,000 to 15,000 tourist guides. To be honest, I don't believe, or I don't think that they will work in the next year. We are now working with them on other job opportunities, maybe to be teachers, because I don't know what the situation in Canada, but the situation in Israel that right now each classroom is divided to 2. So we need double the teachers. So an option is that some of the people that works as tourist guide, that most of them are highly educated, can work also as teachers. And this is something that it's a challenge that we are facing. I already spoke with some tourist guides, some of them above 50, some of them about 60, and they have to find and think about a new career. It's not an easy stage in your life when you're in 50 or 60. What are the other points that I would like to highlight? About the department. Many people in Israel suspected that the department, our department, will go through crisis, that students will ask not to learn tourism hospitality, that everyone will go to management or other areas. But to some degree, it's a bit shocking that we have a raise of almost 300% in the number of students that wants to learn. So suddenly, the Jewish mom wants her children to learn tourism and hospitality. So this is something that is to some degree fascinating. Before I stop, or before I finish, sorry, I would like to relate to some of the questions that I see that I've been asked about here, and I will try to do it also here, or to refer to it. Most of the discussion, my discussions, was about tourism, was about the hotels. But we still don't know what happened with cars rentals. We don't know what happened with train. You have to understand that the fact that there is no train today in Israel until means that for tourists it will be very, very difficult to get around. Another issue that I would like to, what are the plans for the future? What Israel is planning to do? So I know that the Israeli Ministry of Tourism is devoting a lot of effort right now, actually, to make the tourist experience richer. Not cheaper, but richer. They are trying to, what we suspect is that tourists will not go anymore. If some tourists came for 48 hours to Tel Aviv, tourists from Europe, this will not be the situation anymore. We suspect that the new trend will be the tourist will come, like in the old days, for more than 10 days. And the question that we should bravely ask is, does Israel has quality tourist experience for tourists who will come for 7 or 10 days? And this is something that we are right now trying to do. By the way, of course, we thought about it before, but now it's a necessity. And when it's a necessity, you try to be more efficient and to think out of the box. Just get out of the box and think about new ideas. Just to give you an idea that Tel Aviv never thought about. Tel Aviv often hid its Jewish heritage and its Zionist heritage. Tel Aviv was known for a place where you can have a good fun, to celebrate, etc. We are now working on more about experiences, for example, in synagogues in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is very unique in the synagogues which they have, because each of them represent another section of Judaism. And this is something which I believe that you can experience either in New York or in Tel Aviv. You cannot experience in Jerusalem, where most of the synagogues, most of them, not all of them, are highly Orthodox. And this is, Tel Aviv can offer a very interesting experience here. Another issue which we think about is Tel Aviv did not have yet a Judaica market. We are now thinking about having it in a Judaica market where tourists can come and buy their mezuzah or buy whatever they want, and by this, helping the locals and helping specifically the local artists that, of course, right now are also going through an economic crisis. Mark, I see that you want. Yes,
you have 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then questions.
And then questions.
And then Amir.
Okay. So what I do, Amir, do you want to take my 2 minutes and then go for the questions?
Sure. Absolutely. Hello, Canada. It's great to be here on behalf of the Department of Hotel and Tourism Management at Ben-Gurion University. And thanks, Nadav and Yaniv, for your excellent reviews. I just want to add to some of the things that Yaniv mentioned, and I hope, and raise a few more dilemmas that the current crisis poses us. First of all, I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you remember that just a minute before the Corona pandemic crisis started, one of the biggest issues in the world was over-tourism. We talked about the over-tourism, we were concerned by it, there were all TV shows about the crisis that places like Barcelona and Paris and London are facing because of over-tourism and crowded of tourists. And now, just in a second, we are facing an industry that ceased to exist. We don't have tourism anymore, not to mention over-tourism. And I think that, and by the way, over-tourism was heavily discussed in academic forums, heavily written about it in journals. We talked about it, we were concerned, we were sure that this is the issue of the century concerning tourism. And now we finally facing a situation where tourism ceased to exist. I think it demonstrates something larger than just tourism. I think it demonstrates a pretense of knowledge, how little we know about things that are going to happen, how little power and control we have over over circumstances. And I think that this maybe send us some signals that we need to be more modest about the future and about things that's going to happen. Even as scientists, as practitioners, we have very little ability to forecast the future and to be sure what to anticipate. So I think that's very good lesson, both as citizens, as human beings, and also as scientists and tourism people. Second point that I want to mention, Yaniv already mentioned and described how badly the tourism industry in Israel got hurt. Just to illustrate, only 600 foreign tourists came to Israel in April. Just in couple of weeks, the number of incoming tourists just dropped drastically. So the tourism industry really got hurt badly. And that poses us another dilemma or another question that we need to answer. I don't know if many of you are aware of that the Israeli government sees tourism as a national priority, as a national project. Tourism is really important to the Israeli governments over the decades. And why is that? There are many reasons for that, but economically speaking, it's a good question whether we should keep subsidizing the tourism industry the way we do it, with taxpayers' money, of course. because we see how fragile and vulnerable this industry is. We see that in a minute, the industry can completely disappear. And should we keep spending 2.5 billion, 2.5 milliard Israeli shekels a year over subsidies and supporting this industry? Should we dedicate a whole ministry for tourism? Israel, by the way, is one of the in the minority in the OECD's country that has the whole Ministry of Tourism. Most Western countries do not have a specific minister to deal with tourism. So should we keep doing it, or whether it better? Maybe it's better to divert this taxpayers' money to other issues. Maybe that will gain us more success. So this is a question that even us in the tourism industry, that we are, of course, profit from tourism, should ask ourselves, because it's a really difficult question that this pandemic brought to our doors. Just to add some information to this dilemma, Israelis do not like to take vacations in Israel. It's a well-known characteristic of Israelis. Israelis like to take their vacations overseas. In normal times, before the Corona pandemic, we usually had something like 50-50 regarding domestic tourists, Israeli tourists, and that vacation in Israel, and foreign tourists. This is very different from other countries like France or countries in Northern America, that most of the tourists are local, are domestic. So it's hard for us even to convince the Israelis to take vacation in Israel. And we are spending a lot of subsidies and a lot of money and a lot of resources to try to get foreign tourists to our shores. And I think that this pandemic, again, should, at least at the minimum, we should have serious public discussions regarding the future of tourism in Israel and the way we want our government and our country to continue supporting the tourism industry, or maybe change the course and think about it seriously and at least challenging it. And I think in this regard, I will pass to Mark.
Great, I'll take, Mark is muted, okay.
Well, no, I just unmuted. What I said was I will now pass the Q&A over to my colleague Simon Ben-Simon, who, like the voice of God, will be asking the questions, but we won't see him. Simon.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to all our panelists. It was, as always, very interesting. There are a number of questions related to what I would call Jewish tourism, either grandparents, family members who may not be Israelis, but have grandchildren in Israel, people who visit Israel on a regular basis for holidays. There's a question about spending. Can we foresee being able to spend the next Pesach in Israel, opening up the borders to non-Israeli, and it also, related to that, the tremendous Jewish tourism, whether it's birthright, conferences, large gatherings of the North American Jewish communities, missions. Can you please relate to those issues? Nadav, from a public health perspective, Yaniv and Amir.
So I sent on the chat an email of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, where you can send your request. As I from my interaction with them, if you're non-Israelis, you need to have a special reason. This can be bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, bris, or unfortunately someone like a funeral, shiva. Otherwise, like, or maybe a student that was anyway here, like I mentioned, the Medical School for International Health. I helped about a month ago to return some of our students. I don't think there'll be, for now, birthrights or things like that, but if it's so I suggest if people want to visit their families, maybe mention like a special events, not just I want to visit my family. Again, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, brit, I don't know, like a very important birthday or something like that. As to foreseeing what will happen, it's very hard. I don't think that up until Rosh Hashanah, things will change dramatically. Maybe there'll be the pilot that I mentioned, that maybe some countries will have a pilot with Israel, and maybe serological tests or other tests would be accepted so people cannot be on quarantine. I do think that next Passover, but again, it's my, you know, in Hebrew we have the saying that the prophecy is given only for fools. So I'm an epidemiologist, not a fool, or maybe it's the same, I don't know. Epidemiologist and sociologist of health. I do think that probably Passover would be better, also because it will be after the winter is the fall and winter are going to be, I think, very sensitive times. And by next year, I do hope that there'll be a vaccination or treatment already, or we know much more about the event. But currently, for Rosh Hashanah, I don't think there'll be major changes unless they'll be accepting serological tests as you know, a way of avoiding a quarantine. There's a big debate now.
Thank you. Yaniv, Amir, anything to add?
I would like to add and relate to some of the questions by going through this, about this question. If you intend to visit your friends and relatives here in Israel, and I highly appreciate this reason, please take into account that the insurance will be very, very high. This is something that is not yet out there, and people are not speaking about it in the public arena. But what we suspect will be that companies, air flight companies, or whether it's government or whether it's individuals, will have to pay very, very high fees for their insurance. Try to imagine that you flying from Canada to Israel, and here we find out that you have a coronavirus, unfortunately. What will happen if you will be stuck here for 2 months, 3 months? I don't know how long it will take you to get out, to get cured from this, from the corona. So this is something that you have to take into account. And I would like to highlight that, generally speaking, I think that tourism will be back again, like in the 70s and like in the 80s, something that only rich and affluent people will be able to do. Otherwise, we will have to save for it, and we won't do it so much. Unfortunately, we won't do it so much as we did it before in the same amount of frequency. And I would like to raise another issue. Where are you going to stay? One will have to think about this, because we know that demand for Airbnb is dropped dramatically. People are not ready to stay in a place where they don't know who stayed before and whether he was ill. I don't know if there is a justification for this. Nadav knows much better about this. But I know that we already conducted some studies, and people now already prefer to stay in hotels and not in Airbnbs. And they will prefer to stay in a well-known hotels, not because of the quality of the service, but because they believe that it's cleaner there. And to some degree, there may be the case that you will not have a place to stay in. And this is something to think about. And this is something that I didn't relate to it. Right now, I know, let's take, for example, Hilton Tel Aviv, because I just had the opportunity to speak with one of the hotel managers. The demand is high for the rooms. There is a very big demand for rooms in the hotels, but they don't have employees. The situation here is that mainly the Jewish population, but also the Arab Muslim population, is not ready to work in housekeeping. And because of this, we don't have the opportunity to clean the room, and now we need much more people working in housekeeping. So this is another issue. You also raised the issue of birthright. I don't believe that Israeli government will take the chance that a group of people will go all over Israel. It may be the case that if you are coming to visit your friends and relatives, and this is something that is very easy to detect by yourself, by your smartphone, or by there are other ways to detect it. That if, for example, you say, I'm coming for Tel Aviv and I'm not leaving Tel Aviv. I will be in Ramat Gan and I won't leave Ramat Gan. And this is something that we have to think about, that in the option, you will not be able to come to Israel. You will be able to come to Tel Aviv or to Eilat or to Jerusalem and stay there.
Great. So there's a question related to that. What is at this point is the capacity in the hotels, restaurants, sites? Are they open at 40%, 50%? And what is that doing in terms of the industry?
So you related here to three different servicescapes, three different environments, or actually 4 different environments. Let's start with museum, where it's very easy to track how many people are there, and it's very easy. And unfortunately, all around the world, museums are not so popular. Restaurants are much more popular than museums, especially the museums in Israel. But this is something which is very easy, relatively easy to detect, and you can reserve and make reservation for the museum much in advance. So it won't be the case that you will come to the museum and they will tell you, oh, there are already 200 people inside, so sorry, you cannot come today. As a tourist, you can come, you make a reservation, and you can go inside, and it's great. As far as the restaurant is concerned, when you come next time to Tel Aviv, the amount of restaurants, there will be much less restaurants in Tel Aviv than in your previous visit, because the restaurants right now are going for the economic crisis. People are not ready to invest so much. You will find a lot of coffee shops, for example, but we are aware of many well-known restaurants, even in Tel Aviv, that already decided to close the doors. As far as the hotels, here there is a challenge, and a big challenge, because because of the coronavirus, we will need much more employees to clean their rooms, and we don't have enough people to do so. I don't know if you are aware of this. Most of the people that clean the rooms in Eilat, and most of the people that work as waiters in Eilat, are actually people coming from Jordan. Now, what happened in the past is that they used to come in the morning and leave in the afternoon or early evening hours. This is not anymore the case. Now, the Israeli government and the Jordan government are working on an agreement which will provide the people from Jordan the opportunity to come to Eilat and stay there between 2 weeks, even 1 month, even 1 month and a half. People who live in Jordan wish for this deal because the salary in Eilat is 3 times more than the salary in Jordan.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Amir, there's some questions about the dynamics or the economic impact of the internal tourism. I don't, from your comments, I don't think you're a big believer in it, but could you elaborate a little bit, and what is being done or should be done to encourage Israelis, as you mentioned, who are like to leave Israel because it's such a small country and go to other places. But is there an economic impact of the internal tourism?
For the short term, I think that we will see definitely some degree of domestic tourism in Israel, because Israelis will not have any other choices. So they will take some vacations in Eilat. They will go travel to the north, to the Galilee. So we will see some domestic tourism happening, which will give some blood life to the tourism industry. For the long term, after when we will see the airline industry recovers, I find it hard to believe that Israelis will prefer to take vacations in Israel rather than go abroad. There are many reasons why Israelis prefer to travel overseas rather than take vacations at home. Sociological, anthropological, cultural, and economic, of course, reasons for that. I find it hard to see it happening. There are some suggestions right now how to make a swift change in the tourism industry and try to give it some steroids. For example, the Israeli government just discussed the idea of opening a casino in Eilat. This is an idea that we keep hearing. Other thing that might be a game changer is the legalization of cannabis, that we also is now a very hot topic in Israel. And we keep hearing about it, hearing ideas about how to move on with this idea. That type of actions might be game changer. But regarding the attractions, at the destination in Israel, I find it hard to believe that they will finally, the Israeli find it fascinating to vacation in Israel rather than abroad. Yeah.
Guys, one quick question, Nadav. Vaccine within the next 6 months somewhere in the world?
Wow, this is the 1 billion or trillion,
Right.
I don't know, question. Israel bought options for the new vaccine of Moderna.
Moderna, yes, sir.
By the way, the main medical officer there is a graduate of Ben-Gurion University.
Yes.
It looks very, very promising, but to remind you that they still await clinical trials. So
Right.
it's a bet. We are gambling, but it's good that, Israel also bought hydroxychloroquine that finally was not exactly. It's very hard to calculate all those risks because Israel also bought lots of ventilators that finally are not useful. That's another issue. So it's very difficult to do decision making in such uncertainty.
Right.
Guys, to add one small thing, I totally agree with Yaniv about the insurance. But just to let you know that some countries, because of this issue, I know that in Greece, they're going to give free medical needs for those who will be corona positive. And of course, when it's private insurance, the question of premium, this will be based on risk. And of course, age is the most important factor here. So probably for younger people, I guess, Yaniv, some health insurance companies will be willing to take the risk because it's extremely rare to have severe cases, but I don't know, it's my guess. I totally agree about your analysis about international tourism be more for the rich. I totally agree, unfortunately.
Guys, I have to say, another superb webinar. Listening to Yaniv, Amir, and Nadav just make me and my entire team and everyone who's on this call realize how outstanding a university we have and how our professors' staff is among the leading of Israel. Our School of Tourism is one of the most important in the country, and it sustains and helps and creates and develops this multi-billion-dollar industry, which is so important and so vital to Israel. A huge toda rabba. So thank you guys for taking the time out and speaking to our listeners, our 100 listeners. I have to tell you that we could have extended it by 1 hour for sure. And the questions, we have a ton of questions, which we will probably write to you. This is such an important and fascinating subject that everyone wants to know what's going to happen. But a huge toda rabba to my excellent team across Canada: Simon Ben-Simon, Michelle Richmond, Shimi Wenner, Sam Cordes, Paulina Pshanishny, who's a BGU graduate, Zach Ostrov, and David Burson, who is also a BGU graduate, and a great mentor, advisor, and friend, my national president, Mitchell Olbaum, and his leadership team. Thanks as well to my excellent colleagues in Israel, some of whom are listening, to President Danny Shemovitz, or Chaimovitz, of the Vice President Jeff Kay and his team, and Doug Sesserman, my friend and colleague and CEO of the American Associates. A special announcement: our Toronto chapter, in conjunction with the State of Israel Bonds, will be holding a drive-in movie event, Under the Stars, featuring the fascinating movie of what was thought to be lost footage called David Ben-Gurion, an Epilogue. It will be held in Toronto on July 8th, with kosher snacks being distributed at the social distance between cars outside event. So cars will be kept 6 to 8 feet away from each other. You'll have little snacks, and you'll be able to smooch and with your loved ones in the front seat. It is sponsored by Vector Financial, the Olbaum family, and Sobeys, as well as Castles Brock LLP. As a matter of fact, the co-chairs, Naomi Olbaum and David Matlow, are part of today's audience. Please join us for our 8th webinar on Thursday, July 2nd, on the subject, Desert Research is Changing the World, with BGU professors Simon Barak and Amit Gross. Find out why Ben-Gurion has the leading researchers in the world on desert and water studies. Now, everyone, please stay safe. Remember, social and physical distancing, mask and hand washing, and for North Americans, because I know in Israel we never celebrated Father's Day. This Sunday, guys, is Father's Day in North America. So a happy Father's Day to all who are listening. And again, to Yaniv, Nadav, and Amir, Hamon todot. Toda rabba. Everyone have a safe week. Bye-bye. Over and out from BGU Central in Côte Saint-Luc.
Bye-bye.